The inheritance was for the daughter. He denied. Chapter 1. The Fall of a Fortress. The November rain hammered against the glass walls of the Ferraz Tower in downtown Manhattan, each drop creating rivulets that distorted the city lights below. From the 42nd floor, New York looked like a watercolor painting bleeding into itself, much like the life of the man who had built this empire was now bleeding into chaos. Octavio Ferraz was dead, and with him died the carefully constructed facade of a perfect American success story. The mahogany-paneled conference room of Morrison, Blackwell and Associates was thick with tension that morning. The Persian rug beneath their feet had witnessed countless corporate battles, but nothing quite like this. Margaret Ferraz sat rigidly in her Chanel suit, her manicured fingers drumming against the Italian leather of her purse. At 62, she had perfected the art of looking perpetually disappointed, and today that expression seemed carved in stone. Her twin sons, Richard and Michael, flanked her like bookends of entitlement, their Armani suits unable to hide the nervous energy radiating from their bodies. "This is preposterous," Richard muttered, his voice carrying the affected accent of someone who had attended too many private schools. "Father would never." "Silence," Margaret hissed, her eyes fixed on the mahogany door through which their family's fate would walk. 28 years of marriage to Octavio had taught her that men were capable of infinite cruelty, especially when death gave them the final word. The door opened with a soft click, and James Morrison entered, followed by a woman who seemed to carry rain clouds in her dark hair, despite the clear November sky outside. Enna Rodriguez stood in the doorway, like an accidental intruder in a museum, her worn leather jacket and paint-stained jeans a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. At 35, she had learned to navigate the world with the quiet strength of someone who had never been handed anything, and her brown eyes held the wariness of a person who had learned not to trust good fortune. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Morrison said, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of a man paid handsomely to deliver impossible news. "Please, take a seat." Anna remained standing, her artist's hands fidgeting with the strap of her canvas bag. The room smelled of leather and old money, a scent that made her stomach turn. She had grown up in a one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx that smelled of her mother's cleaning supplies and the hope that tomorrow might be better than today. This room smelled of certainty, of power, of everything she had never known. "I don't understand why I'm here," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "The letter said something about a will, but I've never heard of Octavio Ferraz." Margaret's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Of course you haven't, dear. That was rather the point." Morrison cleared his throat and opened the leather portfolio before him. "Before we begin, I must inform everyone present that Mr. Ferraz's instructions were very specific. The will is to be read in its entirety, without interruption, and no questions will be entertained until I have finished." The silence that followed was pregnant with dread. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, but inside this room, time seemed suspended. Morrison's voice, when he began to read, carried the weight of a man who had seen too many families destroyed by the reading of a single document. "I, Octavio Ferraz, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The words fell like stones into still water, each one creating ripples that would forever change the lives of everyone in that room. "To my wife Margaret, who gave me 28 years of her life in exchange for social standing and financial security, I leave the Fifth Avenue penthouse and a monthly allowance sufficient to maintain her lifestyle." Margaret's face remained impassive, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped her purse. "To my sons, Richard and Michael, who have spent their lives waiting for me to die so they could claim what they believed was theirs by birthright, I leave each the sum of $1 million, enough to start over, not enough to continue living as they have." Richard shot to his feet. "This is insane! We're his sons! We're his—" "Sit down," Morrison commanded with surprising authority. "I warned you about interruptions." The real blow came next, delivered in Morrison's measured tone, like a surgeon making a precise incision. The remainder of my estate, including all business holdings, real estate properties, investment portfolios, and liquid assets, valued at approximately $400 million, I leave to Ana Rodriguez, my daughter, whom I have denied every day of my life, and for whom I carry more regret than these words can ever express. The silence that followed was deafening. Ana felt the blood drain from her face as the room began to spin. $400 million. She had never seen $400 in her bank account at one time, had spent sleepless nights wondering how she would pay rent on her studio apartment, had mixed her own paints because she couldn't afford to buy them pre-made. "There has to be a mistake," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the eruption of fury from the other side of the table. "This will never stand," Michael roared, his face purple with rage. "She's nobody, she's nothing. We'll contest this, we'll prove she's a fraud, You'll do nothing," Morrison said calmly, "because Mr. Ferraz anticipated your reaction. The paternity test results are attached to the will, along with photographic evidence and correspondence that will make any legal challenge not only futile, but embarrassing." Ana's hands were shaking now, not with excitement, but with a deep, bone-chilling horror. This wasn't a gift, it was a weapon. A dead man had reached from beyond the grave to destroy his legitimate family and thrust her into a nightmare she had never asked for. Margaret stood slowly, her movements deliberate and predatory. "So this is Octavio's final cruelty," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Not content with 35 years of lies, he decides to humiliate us from the grave with his bastard." The word hit Ana like a physical blow, but she straightened her spine. She had been called worse by better people. "I don't want it," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Whatever this is, whatever game he's playing, I don't want any part of it." But Morrison held up a hand, and Ana saw something in his eyes. Something that looked almost like sympathy. "There's more," he said quietly. Chapter 2. The Key to Understanding. The brass key was small and unremarkable, the kind that might open a desk drawer or a safety deposit box. But as Morrison placed it on the mahogany table between them, it seemed to carry the weight of secrets that had been buried for 35 years. Ana stared at it as if it might bite her, while Margaret Ferraz's eyes burned holes through her skull. "Your father left specific instructions," Morrison continued, his voice gentler now, as if he understood that Ana was as much a victim in this scenario as the family whose world had just imploded. "Before you make any decision about the inheritance, he asked that you spend 1 week in his private office. No one else has ever been inside that room, not his wife, not his sons, not even his closest business associates." Ana's laugh was hollow and bitter. "A week? He wants me to spend a week with a dead man's things, so I can what? Learn to love the father who abandoned me. Understand his noble reasons for pretending I didn't exist." She shook her head, her dark hair catching the fluorescent light. "I've spent 35 years without a father. I'm not about to start getting sentimental now." "The key unlocks his private office on the 42nd floor of the Ferraz building," Morrison pressed on, ignoring her sarcasm. "He wrote in his instructions that if you choose not to visit the office, the entire estate will be donated to charity, and his legitimate family will receive nothing beyond what I've already read." Richard slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. "This is blackmail, emotional manipulation from beyond the grave." "It's exactly what it is," Ana agreed, surprising everyone by taking Richard's side. "And I won't be manipulated by a dead man any more than I was ignored by a living one." But Margaret, who had been silent since her earlier outburst, suddenly leaned forward with the calculating look of a woman who had spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of high society. "Wait," she said, her voice sharp with sudden understanding. "If she doesn't visit the office, we get nothing. If she does visit and then refuses the inheritance, what happens?" Morrison consulted his notes. "If Ms. Rodriguez visits the office as requested and then formally refuses the inheritance, the estate will be divided equally among his wife and sons, minus charitable donations specified in a separate document." The mathematics of greed shifted visibly across the faces of the Faraz family. Suddenly, Anna wasn't just the enemy, she was potentially their salvation. Margaret's expression softened with the kind of artificial warmth she usually reserved for charity galas and campaign fundraisers. "Perhaps," Margaret said carefully, "we're all being too hasty. Anna dear, surely you can understand that this is a shock for all of us. Your father, Octavio, was clearly a complicated man with complicated feelings." Anna felt sick. "Don't you dare call him my father. A father shows up. A father acknowledges his child. A father doesn't spend 35 years pretending someone doesn't exist." The venom in her voice surprised even her. She had spent years in therapy working through her abandonment issues, had built a life she was proud of, despite growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep them afloat. She had made peace with being fatherless, or so she had thought. "1 week," Morrison said quietly. "That's all he asked for. 7 days to sit in his space, to try to understand the man he was beyond the public facade." Anna stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need air." So she walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Manhattan. The city stretched endlessly in all directions. Millions of people living their lives, loving their families, making mistakes they couldn't take back. Somewhere down there was her studio apartment in Brooklyn, where her easel held a half-finished painting of a father and daughter walking hand in hand through Central Park. A scene she had painted from imagination because she had no memories of her own to draw from. "My mother died when I was 28, she said without turning around, her breath fogging the glass. "Lung cancer. She worked in office buildings her whole life, cleaning them at night so she could take care of me during the day. She never remarried, never even dated seriously, because she said she had given her heart away once and couldn't get it back." The room was silent behind her. "When she was dying, she finally told me about him. Said his name was Octavio, that he was married, that he chose his real family over us. She made me promise never to try to find him. Said some doors were meant to stay closed." Anna pressed her palm against the cold glass. "I kept that promise. I built my life without him, raised my son without him, learned to be happy without him." She turned around, her eyes blazing with 35 years of buried pain. "And now he's dead, and he thinks he can buy forgiveness with money? Thinks he can ease his conscience by making me rich?" "Maybe," Morrison said gently. "He just wants you to understand his story before you decide what to do with it." The key lay on the table between them like a challenge, like a bridge to a past Anna had never known existed. She had built her life on the solid ground of self-reliance, had learned to trust her own hands, her own heart, her own strength. But now a dead man was asking her to step into his world, to see through his eyes, to judge him with full knowledge of who he had been. "1 week," she said finally. 7 days. And then I'm done with all of this forever." Margaret smiled, but it was the smile of a shark who smelled blood in the water. "Excellent choice, dear. I'm sure you'll find it very enlightening." Anna pocketed the key and walked toward the door, but Morrison's voice stopped her. "Ms. Rodriguez, there's a security guard on duty 24/7. Building access will be arranged." And Anna, she turned back to look at him. "Your father wrote one more thing. He said to tell you that some stories can only be understood from the ending backward." As Anna left the conference room, she carried with her not just a key to a dead man's office, but the weight of a mystery that would either destroy her or finally give her the father she had never known she was still searching for. Under Chapter 3, The Sanctuary of Secrets. The Faraz Tower at midnight was a monument to solitude, its 42 floors of glass and steel rising like a glittering needle into the dark New York sky. Anna stood in the empty lobby, her footsteps echoing off marble floors that probably cost more than she would make in 5 years of selling her artwork. The security guard, a kind-faced man named Carlos, who spoke with the same Puerto Rican accent as her late mother, had let her in with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy that suggested he knew more about Octavio Faraz's secrets than he was paid to reveal. "Top floor," he had said, handing her a temporary access card. Elevator goes straight up. Don't think I ever seen anyone go to that office except Mr. Faraz himself. Even the cleaning ladies weren't allowed up there. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor number lighting up like a countdown to a confrontation Anna wasn't sure she was ready for. 38, 39, 40, 41, and then the doors opened onto a small anteroom with cream-colored walls and a single door marked private. The brass key Morrison had given her fit perfectly, turning with the soft click of a secret being unlocked. Octavio Faraz's private office was nothing like Anna had expected. She had imagined cold corporate luxury, but instead found herself stepping into what looked like a study from another era. The walls were lined with books, not the leather-bound decorator volumes she might have expected, but well-worn paperbacks and hardcovers with cracked spines and marginalia. The desk was solid walnut, scarred with the rings left by countless coffee cups, and the chair behind it was worn leather that molded to the shape of the man who had spent decades sitting in it. But it was the scent that stopped her cold. Cedar and coffee mixed with something else, the faint ghost of turpentine and linseed oil, the smell of an artist's studio. Anna's hands were shaking as she moved deeper into the room, her eyes adjusting to the soft lamplight that Carlos had switched on from some master panel downstairs. There, on an easel in the corner, stood a painting she recognized but had never seen. One of her own pieces from her first gallery, showing 3 years ago. Mother and child in morning light, a portrait she had painted of her son Diego, playing in the golden hour sunlight of their small apartment. "Impossible," she whispered, moving closer. But there it was, her signature in the bottom right corner, her brushstrokes, her color palette. Somehow Octavio Faraz had acquired one of her paintings. Her legs felt weak, so she sank into the worn leather chair behind his desk. The surface was surprisingly neat for a man who had run a multi-million-dollar empire. Just a few papers, a coffee mug with the faded logo of a Brooklyn coffee shop she recognized, and a small silver frame face down on the leather desk pad. Anna reached for the frame with trembling fingers and turned it over. The photograph was recent, maybe 6 months old, taken with a telephoto lens from across the street from PS 347 in Brooklyn. It showed her son, Diego, now 12 years old, walking out of school with his backpack slung over one shoulder and that crooked smile that always made her heart skip a beat. Someone had been watching them. Someone had been close enough to know their routines, their lives, their daily rhythms. Her breath came in short gasps as the implications hit her. Octavio hadn't just known about her. He had been following her. For how long? How many private moments had he witnessed from the shadows? How many times had she walked past him on the street without knowing? The desk drawer was locked, but the same brass key opened it. Inside, Anna found what would either destroy her or finally help her understand the man who had abandoned her before she was born. A manila folder, thick with papers and photographs, labeled in careful handwriting, "Anna, my daughter." The first photograph took her breath away. It was black and white, obviously professional, and showed a young woman who looked exactly like Anna, standing in what appeared to be an art gallery. But the woman wasn't Anna. The clothing was wrong, the hairstyle dated, the setting clearly from the 1980s. At the bottom of the photo, in the same careful handwriting, someone had written, "Elena at her first showing, 1987. Elena," her mother's name. Anna's hands shook as she flipped through the stack of photographs. Her mother, as a young art student, radiant and beautiful and full of dreams Anna had never known she'd had. Her mother and a man who was unmistakably a young Octavio Faraz, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at some joke lost to time. Her mother pregnant, glowing, her hand resting on the curve of her belly, while Octavio looked at her with an expression of such pure love and terror that Anna felt her own heart break. And then the photographs changed. Octavio alone at what looked like a construction site, his face drawn and grey. A wedding announcement from the New York Times. Margaret Whitmore to wed Octavio Faraz. Dated just 3 months before Anna's birth. Hospital records showing a woman named Elena Rodriguez giving birth to a daughter with no father listed on the birth certificate, but it was the letters that finally broke her. They were organized chronologically, starting with Anna's first birthday and continuing right up until last month. Every single year of her life, Octavio had written her a letter he never sent. The early ones were full of wonder and regret, describing a baby he watched from across playgrounds, a toddler he followed at a distance through Central Park, a little girl whose first steps he witnessed from behind a tree because Eleanor had forbidden him from making contact. "My dearest Anna," read the letter from her 5th birthday, "today you started kindergarten, and I watched you walk into PS 321 with your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles backpack and your mother's stubborn chin. You didn't cry, even though I could tell you wanted to. You're braver than I ever was. I wanted to walk you to your classroom, to meet your teacher, to tell everyone that you're my daughter and I'm proud of you. Instead, I watched from my car and cried like a coward. I chose my reputation over you, and I hate myself for it. But Elena is right. You deserve better than a father who's too weak to claim you." The letter from her 18th birthday was water-stained, as if tears had fallen on it while he wrote, "You graduated today, summa cum laude, heading to art school on a full scholarship. Your mother cried during your speech, and so did I, sitting in the back row where you couldn't see me. You talked about how art saved you, how it gave you a voice when you felt voiceless. I wanted to tell you that you got that from me, that I painted too, once, before I chose money over dreams. But you found your voice without me, and maybe that's better. Maybe children of cowards have to learn courage on their own." There were 43 letters in total, one for each birthday, plus extras for graduations, achievements, heartbreaks he had witnessed from afar. The last one, dated just a month before his death, was the shortest and most devastating. "Anna, my darling girl, I'm dying, and the only thing I regret more than not knowing you is that you'll never know how much I loved you from a distance. I failed you in every way a father can fail a child, and I know my death won't erase that failure, but I hope, somehow, you'll understand that some people are too broken to love properly, but too human not to love desperately. You are the best thing I never deserved, and I'm sorry it took my death to finally tell you so." Anna sat in her father's chair, surrounded by the evidence of a love that had been too cowardly to show itself in life, and finally understood that her inheritance wasn't money at all. It was the truth, and the truth was that she had been loved desperately and hopelessly, and from the shadows, every single day of her life. Chapter 4. The Weight of Forgiveness. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan when Anna finally lifted her head from the desk where she had spent the night reading her father's letters. Her neck was stiff, her eyes red from crying, and her heart felt like it had been torn apart and carefully stitched back together with silver thread. The city was waking up outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, early commuters beginning their daily pilgrimage through streets that suddenly felt different to her, as if she was seeing them through her father's eyes. The discovery had come in the false bottom of the last drawer she searched, hidden beneath what appeared to be standard construction contracts and business correspondence. Another manila folder, this one labeled simply Elena. Inside, Anna found the complete story of her parents' love affair, not the sanitized version her mother had given her on her deathbed, but the raw, complicated truth of two people who had loved each other desperately and destroyed each other completely. They had met at the new school, where Elena was studying fine arts and Octavio was taking night classes in business while working construction during the day. The early love letters between them were poetry written in two voices, her mother's passionate Spanish mixed with English, his careful words hiding a heart that was learning to feel for the first time. They had dreamed together, planned a gallery where her art would be displayed alongside his, imagined children who would grow up understanding beauty and hardship in equal measure. But Octavio's construction business was failing, and his immigrant parents' restaurant was drowning in debt. When Margaret Whitmore's father offered him a business partnership contingent on marrying his daughter, a cold arrangement that would save both families from financial ruin, Octavio had faced the choice that would define the rest of his life: love or survival, dreams or security, Elena or everything else. He had chosen everything else, but he had never stopped loving Elena. The final piece of the puzzle was a legal document Anna almost missed, tucked between photographs of her first art gallery opening that Octavio had apparently attended in disguise. It was a trust fund established in her name when she was just 6 months old, carefully managed and grown over the years. Every month for 35 years, Octavio had deposited money into an account she had never known existed. Not large amounts that would have changed her life dramatically, but enough to ensure that she and Elena never faced eviction, never went hungry, never lacked for art supplies or school clothes or the small securities that had made their modest life possible. "He was there," Anna whispered to the empty office, her voice cracking. "All those times Mom and I thought we were struggling alone. He was there." Her phone buzzed with a text from her son Diego. "Mom, where are you? You didn't come home last night." The normalcy of it, the gentle concern in his words, brought her back to the present. She had a life to return to, a choice to make, a family of her own to consider. But first, she had one more discovery to process. The painting on the easel wasn't just one of hers that Octavio had purchased. It was part of a pair. Hidden behind it was another canvas, this one painted in oils with the kind of skill that spoke of formal training and years of practice. It showed the same scene as her painting, a mother and child in morning light, but painted from memory, from longing, from the perspective of someone who had never been allowed to touch what he most wanted to hold. In the bottom corner, in handwriting she now recognized, was a signature, O Faraz, 2023, and below it, in smaller letters, "For the daughter I watch from windows and the grandson I'll never meet." The grandson he'd never meet. Anna's breath caught as she realized that Octavio had known about Diego, had been watching him too, had been loving him from the same distance that had defined his relationship with her. 12 years of birthdays missed, soccer games observed from parking lots, school plays attended from the back row. Another generation of love that was too ashamed to show itself. The office door opened behind her, and Anna turned to see Margaret Faraz standing in the doorway. But this wasn't the cold, calculating woman from yesterday's meeting. This Margaret looked older, smaller, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled, and her Chanel suit wrinkled as if she had slept in it. "I thought I might find you here," Margaret said quietly. "Carlos called me, said you'd been here all night." Anna wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Come to check on your investment, make sure I'm going to play along, and refuse the inheritance so you can get your money back." Margaret stepped into the office, her eyes taking in the evidence of Octavio's secret life, the paintings, the photographs, the open drawers full of letters and memories. "I came to see what he never let me see," she said simply. 35 years of marriage, and he never let me in this room. I always wondered what he was hiding up here." She moved to the easel, studying both paintings, Anna's professional piece and Octavio's amateur attempt to capture the same emotion. "He was a better painter than I expected," she said with something that might have been admiration. "I never knew he painted at all." "You never knew a lot about him, apparently." Margaret's laugh was hollow. "I knew enough. I knew I married a man who was in love with someone else. I knew our children would never have a father who looked at them the way he looked at photographs he thought I couldn't see. I knew I was living with a ghost." Anna felt an unexpected stab of sympathy for the woman who had been her enemy just yesterday. "Then why did you stay?" "Because leaving would have meant admitting that I had wasted my life on a man who could never love me." Margaret touched the frame of one of the photographs of Elena. "Your mother was beautiful. I saw her once, you know, at a coffee shop in Soho. Octavio didn't know I followed him there. She was painting at a corner table, and he was watching her from across the street. The look on his face..." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "I never saw him look at me like that." They stood in silence for a moment, two women who had been shaped by the same man's inability to choose between love and duty. "The inheritance," Anna said finally. "I've made my decision." Margaret tensed, her mask of composure slipping back into place, and Anna walked to the desk and picked up the key that had started it all. Such a small thing to unlock such a large truth. "I'm going to take it," she said. "All of it. Every penny, every building, every share of stock." Margaret's face went white. "You can't. You said—" "I said I didn't want his money, and I don't, but I want his company." Anna's voice grew stronger as the plan crystallized in her mind. "I'm going to turn Faraz Construction into something he should have built in the first place. Low-income housing, community art centers, scholarships for kids who paint on cardboard because they can't afford canvas." Margaret stared at her. "You'll bankrupt the company within a year. Maybe, or maybe I'll finally build the legacy he was too afraid to build himself." Anna pocketed the key and moved toward the door. "Oh, and Margaret, the Fifth Avenue penthouse and the monthly allowance he left you, you can keep them. Consider it payment for 35 years of loving a man who couldn't love you back." As Anna waited for the elevator, she pulled out her phone and called Diego. His sleepy voice answered on the second ring. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm okay, baby. More than okay. I'm coming home, and then we're going to talk about your grandfather." "I have a grandfather." Anna smiled, thinking of the photographs hidden in Octavio's desk, the evidence of a love that had been too frightened to show itself, but too powerful to die. "You had one, Diego, and I think it's time you knew his story." The elevator doors opened, and Anna stepped inside, carrying with her not just the weight of an unexpected fortune, but something far more valuable, the knowledge that she had been loved, imperfectly and from a distance, but completely and without condition, every day of her life. As the elevator descended through the floors of the building her father had built with his own hands, Anna understood that some inheritances aren't about money at all. They're about finally learning that you were never as alone as you thought you were, and that love, even when it's too cowardly to speak its own name, can still change everything. The doors opened onto the lobby, where Carlos waited with a knowing smile and her first cup of coffee, as the owner of everything she had never wanted and exactly what she had always needed. Outside, New York was waking up to another day, and Anna Faraz, was finally going home to tell her son about the grandfather who had loved him from windows and painted him from memory, and who had finally, in death, found the courage to claim them both.